stubborn child who refuses to do good and follow wise advice, God was always struggling with Israel. They wouldn't listen. They made poor choices. They failed to trust in God and the God who brought them out of bondage. Now, because we're not Jewish, it's hard for us to understand some of those references that are in this story. But Matthew's point is clear. Where the children of Israel, and if you will, sons of God, the children of Israel, failed to live as God intended, Jesus, as the true Son of God, is always faithful. But as you listen to the passage, I want you to think about wilderness. A rugged landscape where you are alone with yourself and your Creator. You cannot run from yourself here. You cannot hide from your own doubts and apprehensions and struggles. And so I invite you to walk with Jesus into this wilderness and be with him as he faces these tests, which are challenges of the soul, tests that determine if your heart belongs to God. Yeah?
The New Revised Standard Version of the book of Matthew, chapter 4, verses 1 through 11. Then Jesus was led up by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. He fasted for 40 days and 40 nights, and afterwards he was famished. The tempter came to him and said, "If you're the Son of God, command these stones to become loaves of bread." But he answered, "It is written, one does not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of God." Then the devil took him to the holy city, placed him up on the pinnacle of the temple, saying to him, "If you're the Son of God, throw yourself down. For it is written, he will command his angels concerning you, and on their hands they will bear you up, so that you will not dash your foot against a stone." Jesus said to him, "Again it is written, do not put the Lord your God to the test." Again the devil took him to a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their splendor, and said to him, "All these I give to you if you will fall down and worship me." Jesus said to him, "Away with you, Satan, for it is written, worship the Lord your God and serve only him." Then the devil left him, and suddenly angels came and waited on him. This is the word of God.
Thanks be to God. Oh God, you are God. And you are the very breath we breathe. It is only in you that we find our rest. Help us to find times to sit with you, to rest in you, to breathe you in, to be at home in you. From the wilderness to the mountaintop, from places of barrenness to places of bounty, let us rest in you. Bless the speaking, the hearing, and the living of your holy word. Amen. This morning I was struck by the notion of wilderness, of that barren and lonely place we sometimes find ourselves in. It's been 8.5 months since Jan died. And I have to say that, grief has put me in a kind of wilderness. Sometimes I feel like I'm wandering around in a great forest, unsure of direction, looking for my center, trying to find again the foundation of my being. At other times I feel barren. I yearn for the things that once sustained me, only to realize they will never be again. And yet the only way to get through and out of this barren land is to go through it. To face my share of struggles, distractions, and temptations. To seek the face of God, who faith tells me is there whether I realize it or not. I recently told somebody, sometimes when we have lost our faith in ourselves, it's good to know that God has faith in us. On the surface, this passage deals with temptation, and we will talk about these three things that Jesus wrestles with. They help us peer into the human soul because we deal with all these temptations, into those seductive yearnings that we have, the need for control, the need for self-gratification. And here I just use the word need, but even that is a fallacy because we all know that all we need is God. We may be able to say that on an intellectual level, but it's one of the lessons we need to learn. And it's one of the lessons you do learn when you are out in the wilderness. But the passage is much more. Matthew is brilliant here, and there's layers and layers on this text. And I said something about it in the introduction, but we'll go a little bit through in the history, but of why these were particular temptations for the Jewish people. But at the same time, I felt moved by God to talk about wilderness, about sitting with God, of even wrestling with temptation, with direction, with God's purpose for our life, what it means to be God's child. So I ask you to think about wilderness. Think about the places where the wild still runs free, far from civilization and order. Wilderness is a place of in-betweenness. It is between here and there. Wilderness is something that you have to go through, traverse on your journey when you want to get from point A to point B. And although there is vibrant life here, there are also places of barrenness. The wilderness is a place where you cannot hide from yourself. In the wilderness, you are forced to examine your own heart of what makes you, you. Your fears, your doubts, your weaknesses, your dreams, your hopes. In the world, you may be able to run away from the things you just don't want to deal with. But you can't do that here. In the wilderness, with the landscape so uncertain, it's easy to become lost, to wander aimlessly, to search frantically, all for some direction. The Jews knew wilderness. They had wandered in it for 40 years, a lifetime of aimlessness, a lifetime of in-betweenness. God had freed them, loosened the bonds of slavery, and yet those stiff-necked people still tested the Lord. From the whining and bickering and sinning to their lack of faith. And so they found themselves in between. Not quite there yet. Not quite reaching the promised land, a land flowing with milk and honey. I mean, they were given direction along the way. They made a covenant. They received blessing upon blessing, and God saved them again numerous times. But they still had to be there in that wilderness a long time. A long time. In the passage from Matthew today, Jesus is led by the Spirit into the wilderness. He's just been baptized. He hasn't even started his ministry yet. And if you remember that baptism, the heavens, the Spirit descending like a dove, a voice from the Lord our God, "You are my Son, the beloved. With you I am well pleased." The exact words we heard last week from God during Jesus' transfiguration. But here in Matthew, it's in the beginning. Jesus hasn't even done anything yet. But it seems that before he can begin his ministry, before Jesus can do what he is meant to do, living out his purpose, he has to go into the wild. Immediately after God inner demons. And he's out there for 40 days, fasting. Fasting, 40 days. And when the 40 days are up, he is famished, weak in body. And it is at this time that the tempter comes with 3 alluring questions that test the Son of God's resolve. Now we know we all have times of weakness. There are times when we are vulnerable, times when temptation is hard to resist. In many ways, this tempter simply gives words to that which is within all of us. Indeed, one can say that all sin is ego or selfishness as we are tempted to put ourselves before God and neighbor. Often this temptation is dressed up in words of flattery which speak to our own self-interest, our own wants and desires. And like all human beings, we need to remember that Jesus was fully human. And he had to wrestle with these temptations as well. So Jesus is led into the wilderness by the Holy Spirit. But why does he fast? Fasting is a way that helps your soul enter wilderness. That place of in-betweenness. The need for food, something so basic that we need to nourish our physical bodies. When we give that up, it helps us to understand our need for God, the bread of life, that which nourishes our spiritual bodies. Fasting prepares one to listen with the heart, to receive guidance and direction from God. And in that famished state, it's like you grow this third eye as you encounter vision and dream. Native Americans fast before they go on their vision quest. And when they read this story, they recognize that's exactly what Jesus went on. You see, when you fast, it helps you give up control. And we all know, I might say, control is an illusion, really. We get that at one level. But when you give things up, you're better able to listen for God's voice, to feel God's embrace, and to be led by God's hand. The other thing is that fasting in the wilderness of giving up control puts you in a position of vulnerability. It peels back the layers around us, the walls that we construct, that we use to hide ourselves behind, so that in the end we are stripped bare and naked for all to see, for God to see. And anytime you are vulnerable, you open yourself up to attack. You open yourself up to temptation. And so the tempter comes with 3 simple offers. They want to see. They see where Jesus' heart is. The first is sort of obvious. It has to do with food. Jesus was famished. He hadn't eaten in 40 days. And you might think, well, surely it wouldn't be so bad if he used his power to feed himself, turn a few rocks into bread. But the Son of God knows better. And the gifts of Jesus are meant to serve others, to glorify God, not to serve the self, however innocent it may seem. We all have gifts, my friends, but God does not bless us with these gifts for any kind of self-gratification. Blessings, they're really not blessings unless they are shared with others. We cannot think of ourselves even as an afterthought. Jesus shows us the way. It is to God we must look, and God alone. And it is the Lord who we must give ourselves to. For the next temptation, Jesus is taken to the pinnacle of the temple. Now this was on top of a great hill. And there was one spot, I'm told, from the sort of history and the politics of the thing, that overlooked a drop of 450 feet, straight down to the valley floor below. And if you think about it, if Jesus jumped off that high roof, that high spot, and the angels there caught him below, boy, that would be a spectacle indeed, wouldn't it? Or if Jesus even just jumped from the high roof down into the courtyard filled with all those visiting pilgrims and priests and vendors and scribes, they would all certainly be amazed at Jesus and what he did. And then he survived. But here's the thing. Sensationalism, fancy acts of showmanship, they are never the vehicle by which the gospel is delivered. Certainly in Jesus there were incredible signs and acts, miraculous acts of power, but they always pointed to something greater, to God. And the true miracle is that the Lord works on the heart. And after all, you don't put God to the test, not with some kind of bargain or threat, or even blind trust. Then you have the last temptation. And it's given to Jesus. The devil gives him all the power of the world. Does it surprise you that the devil is given control of politics? No, not really. Not to me. Now, this thing, though, this temptation is perhaps the most seductive. And truthfully, it's one many of us readily embrace, whether we admit it or not. By showing Jesus all the kingdoms of the world and offering them to him, Jesus has offered the power of kings and pharaohs. Politics, economic pressure, the use of the military, the laws that we use to govern with, all these things within the realm of power. But that's human power. These might get you somewhere in the world, but that is not how God works. If the Lord teaches us anything in the gospel with Jesus Christ, it's that the power of God is the power of the cross. A power that is made manifest through sacrifice and service and weakness and even death. That victory is actually possible only in defeat, and that life can only be experienced in God. Eternal life, a life knowing God, a life that is found through death, through giving yourself up so that God can breathe a life into you. But to this, Jesus tells Satan to get lost and gives us that command that sums up everything. Worship the Lord your God and serve only him. And even that word worship has connotations of service. We know that God must be at the center of everything we do. When it comes to our quest for vision and discernment, let us look to Jesus Christ, who did not shrink back from the path. He faced his demons, and with the help of God, he overcame them. And though we can't help to be as faithful as the Son of God, still we can make a good shot at it. We know that even with the problems that we will face along the way, that actually it is the journey of our soul and our life that ultimately can strengthen our faith. We are encouraged because Jesus faced his fears, and he was even intentional about it so that he could realize his own limitations. never alone. God was with him, and it was his faith in God that helped him find the path that he needed to walk. Jesus needed this time in the wilderness, fasting and praying, so that he would be ready to face the trials that were to come. It is the same way with us. Though we may feel that we are alone, that we may be scared of the wilderness and the chaos that is around us, sometimes we even lose sight of God ourselves. We know that God still is with us and is guiding us. We must look for that guidance, even though we are scared, even though we don't know where the path will take us. We know that it is the journey that makes us stronger. And I urge you, do not run away from your temptations, and don't try and hide from your demons either. Face them in a way that God chooses, so that you may better orient yourself to the purposes of God and what the Lord wants of you in your life. We need not be afraid. We need not fear the wilderness or even those barren times, because God is with us. And we know that God will help us, is helping us, even at this moment. When you are led into the wilderness, embrace this time of in-between. Deal